The day the Zylphians arrived on Earth, humanity learned that superior technology doesn't necessarily equal superior common sense. Their massive ship descended from the clouds with all the grace of a drunken ballerina, bobbing and weaving like a helium balloon in a hurricane. "Behold our mastery over your primitive gravitational forces," announced High Commander Zylith through the global broadcast system, while their flagship performed what could only be described as an aerial interpretive dance routine. The world's military leaders watched in bewilderment as the alien vessel pirouetted past their defense systems. Fighter pilots scrambled to intercept but quickly realized the futility of engaging a target that moved like an excitable puppy chasing a laser pointer. At UN headquarters in New York, delegates from every nation gathered to welcome Earth's first alien visitors. The Zylphians made quite an entrance, literally floating through the ceiling because apparently doors were beneath them, both figuratively and literally. High Commander Zylith, a tall, luminescent being with multiple appendages that seemed to constantly readjust their position in space, hovered above the podium. Their anti-gravity tech created a subtle ripple in the air like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. "We come in peace," Zylith announced, while accidentally bumping into the chandelier, "to share our advanced civilization's greatest achievement, freedom from the tyranny of gravitational attachment." The UN Secretary-General cleared his throat. "We appreciate your unique approach to transportation, but I assure you, Earth has a perfectly functional relationship with gravity." "Oh, you poor ground-bound creatures," Zylith sympathized, patting the Secretary-General on the head with one of their appendages. "Still crawling along your planet's surface like primitive arthropods? But fear not, we shall elevate you beyond such barbaric constraints." The assembled delegates watched as several Zylphian diplomats demonstrated their mastery of anti-gravity by performing elaborate aerial maneuvers. The display might have been more impressive if one of them hadn't gotten tangled in the UN flag display, sending dozens of national banners crashing to the ground. "Perhaps," suggested the Chinese ambassador dryly, "we could continue this discussion with everyone's feet on the floor." "Floors," scoffed Zylith. "A crutch for the gravitationally dependent. Why limit yourselves to 2 dimensions when you can experience the freedom of 3? As if to emphasize their point, a junior Zylphian diplomat chose that moment to demonstrate their species' superiority by attempting to drink from a water glass while upside down. The resulting spray gave the front row of Earth's diplomatic corps an impromptu shower. The UN Security Council exchanged glances. Humanity had prepared for many first contact scenarios: hostile invasions, peaceful exchanges, even religious missionaries. Nobody had prepared for aliens who treated gravity like an optional suggestion and seemed to have the spatial awareness of caffeinated squirrels. Someone was going to have to teach these aliens about gravity before they float-crashed their way into an interplanetary incident. The question was, who would be brave enough, or crazy enough, to take on the task? Dr. Chen had a reputation at MIT for being the kind of professor who threw things at students, not out of anger, but to prove points about gravitational acceleration. Her lecture halls were always packed, partly because of her brilliant mind and partly because everyone wanted to see what she'd drop next. The university's insurance department had a special Dr. Chen clause after the infamous bowling ball demonstration of 2023. The fact that she'd successfully proven her theory about quantum gravitational effects was considered less important than the 3 broken floor tiles and 1 thoroughly traumatized graduate student who now flinched at round objects. So when the UN's emergency call came through, she was in the middle of explaining gravity wells using a makeshift black hole made from her morning coffee and a borrowed super collider. The Dean of Physics had long since stopped asking questions about her methodology. "Dr. Chen," the UN Secretary-General's voice crackled through her phone, "we need Earth's foremost expert on gravity, and someone with unusual teaching experience." "Did someone finally break physics?" she asked, casually stabilizing the coffee-based singularity with a stirring stick. "No, but we have aliens who think they've outsmarted it. They're currently trying to play zero-gravity basketball in the General Assembly Hall." Maya glanced at her coffee black hole, then at her stunned students. "I'll be there in an hour. Just need to safely dispose of a small gravitational anomaly first." The UN's desperation level could be measured by the fact that they sent a helicopter to pick her up. after she'd promised not to conduct any impromptu experiments during the flight. The pilot seemed relieved when she only took notes about rotary motion instead of attempting to demonstrate it. Arriving at UN headquarters, Maya found chaos that would have made her lecture halls look orderly by comparison. A Zylphian delegate floated past, tangled in computer cables and spinning like a deranged tetherball. Dr. Chen, the Secretary-General, greeted her, ducking as another alien zoomed overhead. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to teach these beings about gravity before they accidentally discover it the hard way. Maya watched as a Zylphian attempted to drink coffee while doing a mid-air somersault. Challenge accepted, though I might need to requisition some crash mats, and maybe a trampoline. Dr. Chen's first classroom session with the Zylphians took place in a reinforced lecture hall that had been hastily padded with gymnasium mats. The aliens hovered at various heights, turning the three-dimensional seating arrangement into something resembling a floating game of Tetris. Today, Maya announced, we're going to discuss the fundamental force that shapes our universe. She wrote gravity on the board in large letters. High Commander Zylith raised 3 appendages simultaneously. Ah, yes, the primitive anchoring force your species hasn't learned to overcome. How quaint. Primitive? Maya picked up an apple from her desk. Tell me, what happens when I do this? She tossed it toward a junior Zylphian diplomat. The alien caught it with a tentacle-like appendage, looking smug. Nothing remarkable. Now turn off your anti-gravity device. That would be most undignified. Just humor me. The young Zylphian reluctantly deactivated their personal gravity nullifier. The resulting crash landing into a pile of safety mats was followed by the apple bonking them squarely on the head, in what Maya would later describe as the most satisfying demonstration of Newtonian physics I've ever witnessed. But the real disaster struck during that evening's diplomatic dinner. The Zylphians had insisted on demonstrating their superior dining methodology by hosting a zero-gravity buffet. Picture, if you will, hundreds of bite-sized hors d'oeuvres floating through the air like tasty satellites, while delegates attempted to catch them with their mouths like hungry fish. Everything went smoothly until the soup course. Maya had tried to explain that liquid dynamics in zero gravity might pose certain challenges. The Zylphians dismissed her concerns as gravity-bound thinking. The resulting incident would go down in diplomatic history as the Great Consomme Catastrophe. Dozens of globules of hot soup drifted through the air like tiny, scalding planets. The French ambassador's toupee was lost to a rogue bread roll. The Japanese delegation demonstrated impressive reflexes by catching flying sushi with chopsticks, while the Italian ambassador wept openly as meatballs orbited his head like edible moons. The breaking point came when the Zylphians' anti-gravity generator hiccuped during dessert. The sudden return of gravitational forces turned the floating buffet into an impromptu food meteor shower. The UN cleaning staff would be finding creme brulee in the chandelier for months, but the Zylphians remained stubbornly unimpressed. During the next day's lecture, they floated in their usual chaotic arrangement, while Maya attempted to explain gravitational waves using a water tank demonstration. Observe how the waves propagate through... She stopped mid-sentence as one of the aliens performed a lazy barrel roll. Commander Zylith, are you even paying attention? Of course, I'm simply maintaining optimal blood flow through my thinking tentacles. Maya pinched the bridge of her nose. Right, let's try something else. She pulled out a small device. This is a prototype gravity wave detector. It's quite sensitive to... She never finished the sentence because at that moment, 3 junior Zylphians decided to play anti-gravity leapfrog near the detector. The resulting gravitational interference pattern caused every loose object in the room to briefly float before crashing down, including the water tank. As Maya stood in a puddle of demonstration water, watching the Zylphians perform what looked like an aerial version of synchronized swimming, she realized normal teaching methods weren't going to cut it. The aliens had managed to turn her carefully planned physics demonstration into what looked like a zero-gravity circus act. Class dismissed, she announced, dodging a floating textbook. But tomorrow... A dangerous glint appeared in her eye, the same one her MIT students had learned to fear. Tomorrow, we're going to have a little field trip. The Zylphians exchanged excited looks, completely missing Maya's predatory smile. They had no idea they were about to learn about gravity the hard way, the Dr. Chen way, and it was going to be a lesson they'd never forget, assuming they survived it. The challenge began, as many historical turning points do, with someone saying, "Hold my beverage." In this case, it was High Commander Zylith holding their quantum-stabilized zero-gravity drink, while declaring humanity's gravitational dependence to be adorably prehistoric. Maya had been explaining the role of gravity in planetary formation when Zylith interrupted with what could only be described as the most condescending hover wiggle ever witnessed by human eyes. "Perhaps," Zylith announced, their bioluminescent spots pulsing with smug superiority, "we should settle this debate with a proper demonstration of technological advancement. A wager, if you will." The UN Security Council representatives leaned forward in their seats. The Russian delegate muttered something that sounded suspiciously like, "Finally, some action." "What exactly are you proposing?" Maya asked, already forming plans within plans. Zylith performed a graceful aerial somersault that would have been impressive if they hadn't accidentally slapped another Zylphian with their posterior appendages. "We will provide your species with our anti-gravity technology, free of charge, out of pity for your ground-bound existence. And in return, if we can prove that anti-gravity technology is superior for all construction, transportation and daily life applications, your species must abandon your primitive gravitational methods and adopt our ways." The assembled human delegates burst into murmurs. Maya held up her hand for silence, her eyes narrowing. "And if we prove that understanding and working with gravity is more effective? Then," Zylith's voice dripped with certainty, "we will share all our advanced technology with Earth, not just our gravity nullifiers, though there's no chance of that happening." Maya smiled. It was the kind of smile that had made her graduate students check their life insurance policies. "Challenge accepted, but I get to design the testing parameters. Of course, we're nothing if not sporting about our superiority." While the diplomats hammered out the official terms, Maya retreated to her temporary office at the UN building. The room looked like a cross between a physics lab and a military command center, with whiteboards covered in equations and maps marked with mysterious X's. She began making calls, first to NASA, then to CERN, then to several extreme sports facilities. By the time she reached out to the Navy SEALs, her assistant had started stress-eating donuts. "Dr. Chen," he asked nervously, watching her pin another location on her world map, "are you sure about this? Remember when I proved quantum entanglement using nothing but 2 rubber ducks and a microwave? That experiment set off every fire alarm in the physics building." "Exactly. Sometimes the best way to learn is through controlled chaos." She marked another X on the map. "And these aliens need all the chaos we can safely throw at them." The next morning, Maya presented her lesson plan to the UN Oversight Committee. The color slowly drained from their faces as she outlined each phase of her gravity appreciation curriculum. "You want to do what?" the Secretary General sputtered. "Take them through a series of carefully designed, real-world gravity demonstrations," Maya replied calmly, each one highlighting a different aspect of gravitational physics and its practical applications. "This looks more like a special forces training program." "With some extreme sports mixed in," she agreed cheerfully. "Don't worry, I've calculated all the survival probabilities." "That's not as reassuring as you think it is." But the Zylphians, in their infinite overconfidence, loved the plan. They viewed it as an opportunity to demonstrate their technological superiority in various Earth environments. The fact that they kept bumping into doorframes while expressing this confidence did nothing to dampen their enthusiasm. Maya spent the next week setting up her demonstrations. She requisitioned equipment from 3 space agencies, 2 military branches, and 1 circus school. She had monitoring stations established at points around the globe, each one chosen for its unique gravitational properties. The UN's insurance department tried to stop by to discuss liability issues, but Maya managed to avoid them by technically being in 4 different time zones that week. She was pretty sure temporal displacement wasn't covered under their existing policies anyway. Finally, everything was ready. Maya gathered the Zylphian delegation in the UN auditorium for a briefing. As they bobbed and weaved in their usual anti-gravity dance, she unveiled a holographic display of Earth. "Ladies, gentlemen, and gravity-defying friends," she announced, "welcome to what I'm calling Gravity Appreciation 101 Extreme Edition. Over the next few weeks, you'll experience gravity in all its glorious forms, from the crushing depths of the ocean to the weightlessness of high-altitude parabolic flight. Sounds delightful. Zylith executed a happy spiral. When do we start? Maya's grin would have made a shark think twice. Pack your bags for Antarctica, we begin tomorrow. As the aliens chattered excitedly about their impending victory, Maya's assistant sidled up to her. You're enjoying this way too much. Sometimes, she whispered back, the best way to teach physics is to let people experience it firsthand, preferably at high velocity. The assistant glanced at her lesson plan again. Should I alert the emergency response teams? Already done. Now, help me load these concrete blocks onto the plane. I want to demonstrate terminal velocity first thing in the morning. Lesson 1 began at 30,000 feet above Antarctica. The Zylphians, floating comfortably in their temperature-regulated anti-gravity bubbles, watched with amusement as human skydivers checked their equipment. Observe, Maya shouted over the wind, how proper understanding of gravitational forces allows for controlled descent. She stepped toward the open aircraft door. But why not just float down, asked a Zylphian scientist, right before their anti-gravity device encountered the minus 40 degrees Celsius temperature and promptly froze. The resulting chaos taught the aliens several lessons about gravity, terminal velocity, and why backup parachutes are a really good idea. The fact that 3 Zylphians had to be fished out of a snowbank by a rescue team was, according to Maya, a bonus lesson in momentum conservation. Next came the mountain climbing expedition in the Himalayas. Maya had chosen Mount Pumori, a peak that offered what she called an excellent vertical learning environment. Your anti-gravity tech is impressive, she acknowledged as they began the ascent. But what happens when it fails? Our technology never fails, declared Zylith, right before a magnetic storm from a solar flare temporarily disrupted their systems. The next few hours provided an intensive crash course in friction, handholds, and why shouting gravity is a myth doesn't actually prevent you from sliding down a glacier. The mountain rescue team later described the sight of aliens tangled in climbing ropes as like a Christmas tree decorated by someone having an existential crisis. But it was the ocean lesson that really drove the point home. Maya had arranged for a submarine demonstration in the Mariana Trench. Water pressure is just gravity getting creative, she explained as they descended. The Zylphians remained unimpressed until they reached depth, where their anti-gravity systems encountered an unexpected problem. They worked too well. By counteracting the enormous pressure, the devices created a pressure differential that turned their protective bubbles into what Maya later described in her paper as organic ping-pong balls. The aliens bounced between the ocean floor and the thermocline layer for 20 minutes before the subcrew could retrieve them. Fascinating, muttered a thoroughly soaked Zylith, trying to maintain dignity while wringing seawater from their sensory tentacles. The interaction between gravitational forces and fluid dynamics is more complex than we anticipated. Just wait until we get to the wave pool, Maya grinned. The wave pool experiment was technically not approved by the UN committee, but Maya argued that understanding ocean dynamics was crucial for any spacefaring civilization. The resulting rogue wave incident would later be classified as both a scientific breakthrough and a minor international incident. They moved on to the zero-gravity training facility in Houston, where Maya demonstrated the difference between true zero gravity and artificial gravity cancellation. The Zylphians learned this distinction the hard way when their anti-gravity fields created an unexpected resonance with the parabolic flight path. Congratulations, Maya announced to the aliens now stuck to the airplane's ceiling. You've just invented gravity multiplication. Would anyone like to hypothesize about the forces involved? Or should we focus on getting Commander Zylith's tentacles unpasted from the emergency exit? The tornado simulator was next. Maya insisted it was necessary to understand gravity's role in atmospheric dynamics. The Zylphians insisted their anti-gravity tech could overcome any mere wind. Both turned out to be right in a way. The aliens did manage to counter the tornado's pull, only to discover that this created a secondary vortex that sucked up everything that wasn't bolted down. The facility's staff spent 3 days retrieving scientific equipment from nearby trees. Consider, Maya lectured while helping a Zylphian untangle themselves from a weather balloon, how gravity interacts with other forces to create stable systems. By negating one force, you often amplify others in unexpected ways. The aliens began taking notes, though it was hard to tell if they were writing down physics principles or just documenting their growing collection of bruises. Desert training proved equally enlightening. The Zylphians learned about sand dynamics when their anti-gravity fields created localized dust devils. One particular incident involving a sand dune, 3 camels, and a misplaced gravity nullifier led to what Bedouin observers described as the first flying oasis. Maya scheduled their final practical lesson at the Large Hadron Collider. The Zylphians were thrilled, believing their advanced technology would finally prove superior in a high-tech environment. Now, Maya explained, standing before the massive particle accelerator, let's discuss how gravity affects quantum-level interactions. The aliens activated their finest anti-gravity equipment, ready to demonstrate their mastery over fundamental forces. Nobody expected the gravity nullifiers to interact with the collider's magnetic field in quite such a spectacular way. The resulting light show was visible from space. The good news was that they technically did achieve quantum tunneling. The bad news was that it happened to Commander Zylith's favorite tentacle appendage, which briefly existed in 7 dimensions at once. As they watched the CERN scientists run around with radiation meters and quantum stabilizers, Maya turned to her increasingly humbled students. Pop quiz. Who can tell me why that happened? Every Zylphian appendage shot up, followed by a chorus of perfectly correct scientific explanations. Maya smiled. Finally, they were starting to understand. You know, said a junior Zylphian scientist while helping to clean up the quantum residue, perhaps there's something to be said for working with natural forces rather than always trying to counter them. That's the most intelligent thing any of you have said since arriving. Maya nodded. Now, who's ready for the final exam? The aliens exchanged nervous glances. After everything they'd been through, the skydiving, the mountain climbing, the oceanic ping-pong session, the quantum tentacle incident, what could possibly be left? Maya's grin widened as she pulled out a simple rubber ball. Let's talk about planetary engineering. The final test took place at the International Space Station's new expansion project, where humanity and Zylphians would compete to construct identical modules. The stakes, Earth's construction methods versus alien anti-gravity technology. Welcome to your final exam, Maya announced to the assembled aliens floating in their safety suits. Today you'll be building without your gravity nullifiers. The horrified gasps from the Zylphians almost depressurized the airlock. But how will we manipulate the components? Zylith demanded, their bioluminescent spots pulsing with anxiety. The same way we do, said the human construction chief, tossing them a tether line, with physics, math, and good old-fashioned elbow grease, or whatever the Zylphian equivalent is. The first hour was pure comedy. The aliens discovered that trying to maneuver a solar panel in 0G without anti-gravity tech was like trying to waltz with a hyperactive octopus. One Zylphian got tangled in their safety line and spent 20 minutes spinning like a deranged tetherball. Remember Newton's third law, Maya called out as she watched a Zylphian push off a panel too hard and careen into the void, requiring rescue from a patient human colleague. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Meanwhile, the human construction team moved with practiced precision. They used momentum and inertia like dance partners, guiding massive components into place with subtle adjustments and carefully calculated trajectories. Notice how they're using gravity assist from the station's mass, Maya pointed out. Those slight course corrections are saving thousands in fuel costs. A Zylphian technician, wrestling with a particularly stubborn coupling mechanism, paused thoughtfully. The humans, they're not fighting physics, they're working with it. The lesson really hit home when both teams had to install their respective airlocks. The human team used the station's rotation to swing the heavy door into position like a practiced circus act. The Zylphians, attempting to muscle their airlock into place through brute force, created what could only be described as a 0G pinball game, with themselves as the bumpers. Precision through prediction, Maya shouted as she helped untangle 2 Zylphians who had accidentally tied themselves together. You don't need to cancel gravity if you can calculate its effects. Hour by hour, the aliens began to adapt. They started copying human techniques, learning to use momentum instead of fighting it. Their tentacle-like appendages, once flailing wildly in space, began to move with purpose. The breakthrough came when a junior Zylphian engineer figured out how to use their natural buoyancy bladders, usually employed for their anti-gravity tech, to make micro-adjustments in zero-G. Soon, they were moving almost as smoothly as the humans. "Fascinating," Zylith muttered, watching their team finally start to make progress. "By understanding the force we sought to negate, we've gained better control than our technology allowed." The real excitement came during the final phase, connecting power systems between the modules. A slight miscalculation by the Zylphian team sent an electrical conduit spinning off into space. Without their anti-gravity devices, they could only watch helplessly as it tumbled away. That's when they witnessed true human ingenuity in action. Two astronauts coordinated a rescue maneuver that looked like a choreographed ballet. Using nothing but basic physics, they created a slingshot effect with their tether lines, caught the wayward conduit, and guided it back to the station. "Now that," Maya announced proudly, "is applied gravitational mathematics in action." Even more impressive was the human team's solution for aligning the module's complex docking mechanisms. Instead of trying to force the pieces together, they used the station's natural orbital motion to gradually bring the components into alignment. "They're using Earth's gravity well as a construction tool," a Zylphian physicist realized, their spots glowing with excitement. "The entire planet is part of their toolkit." By the final hour, something remarkable had happened. The Zylphians weren't just copying human methods, they were improving on them. They combined their natural abilities with their new understanding of gravitational physics to create hybrid techniques that even the human engineers found impressive. "Look at that," the construction chief whistled as a Zylphian used their buoyancy bladders to create a controlled rotation effect. "They're actually getting better at this than we are." The project finished ahead of schedule, with both modules successfully integrated into the station. The human section was textbook perfect. The Zylphian section looked slightly more artistic in its construction, but was equally functional. As both teams gathered in the new common area for a zero-G celebration, Maya noticed something interesting. The Zylphians had chosen not to reactivate their anti-gravity devices. "We've found," Zylith explained, performing a perfect zero-G somersault, "that understanding how to work with natural forces provides more control than trying to eliminate them entirely." A human engineer floated by, offering congratulatory beverages in special space containers. "Welcome to the Gravity Appreciation Club." "Although," a Zylphian engineer added, catching their drink with a deft tentacle movement, "we might have some ideas for improving your space construction methods. Have you considered combining our buoyancy control with your orbital mechanics?" Maya smiled as she watched humans and aliens begin an animated discussion about hybrid construction techniques. The best kind of learning, she knew, was the kind where everyone came away with new knowledge, even the teacher. The closing ceremony took place in the UN headquarters, though this time the Zylphians chose to remain firmly planted on the ground. Their anti-gravity devices, while still functional, remained conspicuously inactive. High Commander Zylith approached the podium the old-fashioned way, by walking. The assembled delegates tried not to look too smug about this development. "We came to Earth believing we had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe," Zylith began, their bioluminescent spots pulsing with a mix of humility and amusement. "We were wrong. More importantly, we were wrong about being wrong." Maya, sitting in the front row, raised an eyebrow. "You see," Zylith continued, their voice growing serious, "we didn't just learn about gravity. We learned why we needed to learn about gravity." They paused, appendages fidgeting. "Perhaps it's time we shared our own history." The hall fell silent as Zylith revealed the truth. Centuries ago, the Zylphian civilization had nearly destroyed itself through over-reliance on anti-gravity technology. Their cities, built without regard for structural integrity, had begun to collapse. Their children, raised without experiencing natural gravitational forces, had developed severe health issues. Their spacecraft, designed to negate gravity rather than work with it, had proven catastrophically inefficient. "We solved these problems technically," Zylith explained, "but never fundamentally. We created better nullifiers, stronger force fields, more powerful generators. We never stopped to ask if we were approaching the problem from the wrong direction." A junior Zylphian scientist floated up, using good old-fashioned jumping, to share their data. The efficiency improvements they'd discovered by combining human gravitational engineering with Zylphian technology were staggering. Their new hybrid designs promised to revolutionize space travel, construction, and exploration. Therefore, Zylith announced, in accordance with our wager, we will share all our advanced technology with Earth, but, they added with a ripple of bioluminescence that Maya had learned to recognize as their equivalent of a grin, we request something in return. Oh, the Secretary General leaned forward. We want to enroll more Zylphians in Dr. Chen's gravity appreciation courses, and perhaps establish a joint physics institute. Maya stepped up to the podium, trying not to look too pleased with herself. I suppose I could clear my teaching schedule, though we'll need to reinforce the classroom floors and possibly the walls, and definitely get better insurance. As humans and aliens mingled after the ceremony, discussing plans for future collaboration, Maya noticed something interesting. The Zylphians were teaching humans how to use their buoyancy bladders for enhanced movement, while the humans were showing them the joy of simple things like jumping rope and swing sets. You know, her assistant commented, watching a group of Zylphian scientists excitedly design a gravity-based roller coaster, this isn't quite how anyone expected first contact to go. Maya smiled, remembering all the chaos, mishaps, and breakthroughs of the past few weeks. Sometimes the best way to bring people together is to let them fall down together first. She paused. Preferably in a controlled educational environment with proper safety equipment. Somewhere in the background, a Zylphian discovered the entertainment value of a Newton's cradle. The resulting enthusiasm suggested that Earth's physics toy industry was about to experience an unexpected boom in extraterrestrial sales.